My name is Christy Rome, and I'm the Executive Director of the Texas School Coalition. We're an organization that supports lasting and meaningful investments in our public schools. And I want to thank you all for being here this morning on what we know is a hectic morning of a hectic weekend, and also Memorial Day. So I want to take a moment to express our gratitude for the individuals and families who've paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country. But before you today stand parents, educators, elected school board trustees, school administrators, and people from communities throughout Texas who support our public schools. Because we are here today to express gratitude to members of the Texas House who have stood together in a bipartisan coalition of legislators and stood in strong support of our public schools and protected our state from private school vouchers. Supporters of public education have fought against vouchers in Texas for decades. And the push to privatize our schools has never been louder and never been more well-funded. But a diverse and bipartisan coalition of legislators stood strong in defense of our public schools. At a time of severe, divisive partisanship at the national level, it's heartening to see that in Texas and in this legislative session, the support of our public schools transcends partisan lines. Regrettably, Texas teachers are not getting the raise that they so richly deserve this legislative session, and public schools are not receiving the additional funding that they need. We want to be clear. The improper linkage between funding for our public schools and private school vouchers cost our schools billions of dollars that could have gone towards teacher salaries and other classroom needs. The Texas Senate tried to prevent a false choice: private school vouchers or nothing for public schools. But we do not accept this false choice. And fortunately, the Texas House did not either. The governor and the Texas Senate did everything they could this session to pass an ESA voucher plan that was large, expensive, and completely void of any form of accountability. The push for ESA vouchers is going to continue. And we are asking the members of the Texas House to stand with the students and teachers of Texas. With the legislative session ending, we need the people of Texas to speak up. Our governor, our lieutenant governor, our legislators need to hear from parents, educators, and others who support public education in this state. They need to hear that Texans do not support putting public funds into private and home schools that are lacking in accountability for outcomes or the use of taxpayer resources. They need to hear that Texans want real pay raises for teachers and real investments in our public schools that are not attached to vouchers. And they need to hear that Texans understand that the best way to prepare for economic success in our state is to invest in our public schools that educate all students. In a special session, our elected leaders will have another chance to stop pushing privatization schemes and to focus instead on supporting the public schools that are at the heart of every Texas community. And the people of Texas, by speaking up for our kids, have a chance to impact the decisions they make. So we encourage all Texans: call your legislators, voice your support for public education, and do better for the 5.5 million students in this great state. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Brown.
Good morning, and happy Memorial Day to everybody. Like Christy, I want to celebrate this particular day in appreciation for all of those who gave their lives to our country, and for those who even currently serve today. It's unfortunate that we're having to be here today on Memorial Day to ask for what is constitutionally required of our state legislature. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm the Executive Director for the Texas Association of School Administrators. This has been a difficult session for public education, but one bright spot has been the bipartisan efforts and the courage of a bipartisan coalition in the Texas House that has stood up for our public schools against ESA vouchers. The people of Texas owe a tremendous thanks to the members of both parties who stood up and protected our public schools. Without their courage, supporters of private school vouchers would have already begun to dismantle the schools, the public schools that serve every community and are available to every child and welcome every child. They're accountable to all taxpayers. They're transparent to everybody in the community. They serve everybody. They are a public good. We have seen the damage done to public schools in states that have vouchers, and we don't want that in Texas. Texas is an independent state. It's a great state, and we do things the Texas way, and that includes not having vouchers in this state. We believe in our public schools and the role that they play in the fabric of our communities. The Texas Senate's inclusion of private school vouchers in the last remaining school finance bill was a poison pill, and they knew it. The Texas Senate's, in 2011, legislators made painful cuts to public schools. I was a superintendent at the time. It was a very difficult time. But the reason we did cuts was because there was limited funding at the time. But in 2023, we have record amounts of funds that could go towards this incredible public good in public schools. But the legislature has chosen, the Senate and the governor have chosen not to provide those funds to public education in a time when we have so much. It's time for the political games to stop. It's time to fund our schools, to give teachers pay raises, to adjust for inflation, to do all of these things that public schools need today, and not to hold those funds hostage so that we have vouchers. This is tragic because public schools have experienced 14.5% inflation over the past 2 years, which has actually caused a net decrease in pay for everyone in schools, from teachers to bus drivers to librarians to secretaries to crossing guards to administrators to counselors to nurses to librarians. We are struggling to keep up with inflation. Just break even would be 14.5%, and we've not been able to achieve that. Insurance premiums, utility bills, transportation, food services, among others, have skyrocketed over the past 2 years. And Texas is 43rd in the country in per student funding. 43rd. The great state of Texas, with the 8th largest economy in the world, is only 43rd in per student funding, and it appears that we're in a race to the bottom. While other states are supporting their schools and consequently ensuring a bright future for their children and their states, it feels like our state has abandoned our public schools, with the exception of the bipartisan coalition in the House that has supported public schools this session. Our students and educators deserve better, especially when bountiful resources exist and morale is the lowest that I've ever seen in my career. The bill proposed by the Senate ignores the constitutional obligation of the Texas legislature. Article 7, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution calls for the support and maintenance of a system of public free schools. Nowhere does it say that the support of public schools should be tied to funds flowing to private schools. And I would just remind you, when Texas declared independence from Mexico, we listed lack of funding for public schools as one of the reasons that we rebelled against Mexico. In the Texas Declaration of Independence, it talks about the critical importance of public ed in creating an educated citizenry and protecting the civil rights and liberties of all Texans. And I would also tell you that Alexis de Tocqueville wrote in Democracy in America in the early 1800s that it's the provisions set forth for public education which from the very first set into clearest relief the originality of American civilization. Public schools are integral to our country and to our state, and we cannot abandon them and continue to be the bright light in our country that we've been for more than 2 centuries. Schools are already preparing for the adoptions of their budget. For about 25% of schools, those budgets will be adopted over the next few weeks. We are asking schools to adopt budgets during a time of great uncertainty as to what their funding will be, and it didn't have to be this way. The political games played by the Texas Senate have created this uncertainty. The Texas House made it clear, and they do not support private school vouchers. Yet the governor and the Senate tried to bully them into supporting a policy that their constituents simply don't want. We give thanks for those House members who voted for their public schools, and we ask them to stay strong. And to the governor and Senate and others pushing private school vouchers, we respectfully urge you to drop these political games, stop trying to do something that will not benefit students, that will not be accountable to taxpayers, that will not be transparent to all, and focus instead on your constitutional obligation to support public schools for all children. At this time, I'd like to introduce Nancy Humphrey. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Humphrey, and I am the president of the Board of Trustees in Plano ISD. So I'm happy to be down here in Austin on Memorial Day and the last day of the state legislature. As others who spoke before me, I want to thank the members of the Texas House, the Republicans and the Democrats, who stood with our students, with our teachers, our public schools this session against the harm that would be caused by private school vouchers. Throughout this session, we waited for voucher advocates to tell us what are the standards of accountability that are mandated for public schools that would also be mandated for publicly funded private schools. And those answers never came. Never were we told that private schools receiving taxpayer dollars would be subject to the A through F accountability system, or would they comply with the open records laws, or would they follow the federal special education requirements, or that they must meet the same school safety standards that public schools must follow. Texans do not want to give away billions of dollars to private schools with no system of accountability or financial transparency for how well those schools are serving their students. The good news is that in the special session that is most likely coming forward, our legislators have more flexibility than the approach taken by the Texas Senate during the regular session. If legislators really want to ensure that there is more funding for classrooms and for teacher pay, they will consider school finance separate from ESA vouchers for private school. Those are two different decisions. We urge legislators to concentrate on helping schools strengthen their teaching workforce and catching up with that 14.5% compounded inflation experienced over the past 3 years. We urge them to take and make robust and meaningful increases to the basic allotment. That's the mechanism that funds our public schools, and that has not increased since 2019. If they are determined to consider the harmful ESA vouchers for private schools and let those proposals stand on their own merits, let the members of the legislature consider them separately. They are not intertwined. Excuse me. It's time for the governor and the Texas Senate to stop holding funding for education hostage. Public schools are the fabric of our communities. Despite Texas having the 8th largest global economy, it ranks in the bottom 10 states in terms of school funding. I just heard 43rd. Investing in public schools is an investment in the future workforce of Texas and is necessary to sustain this robust economy that we're very proud of. As we approach this special session, I urge all Texans to voice your support for the students, the teachers, the communities, and all of those involved with our public schools. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Do you see funding, and we're obviously going to a special session, right? Do you see public school funding part of that conversation in special session? Can you give any predictions on that?
Well, no one up here gets to call the special session, but there has certainly been rumors, and we hold out hope that there was a contingency rider in the Appropriations Act that was adopted by the legislature and has been sent to the governor. If legislation is passed, then that funding could flow to schools and could be used for teacher raises.
Yeah, I guess expanding on that, because obviously they have to pass the budget before they gap off, but do you see these conversations continuing, even though the governor has expressed that he wants a special session specifically for vouchers?
We are always open to conversations, and I think that I can speak for everyone who's standing here today, that we are open for those conversations that will help to support our schools. And if anybody wants to add anything to that, but
I'd like to add to that.
Could you come up to the podium, please? And say your name.
Yes, Jesus Chavez with South Texas Association of Schools. I guess the way I view the special session, and I think it's been indicated here, they really ought to separate those two issues, right? If the governor wants to continue to talk about vouchers, we hope he doesn't. But if he does, then we need to separate vouchers versus funding for our students and our teachers and our school districts. So if there is a special session, yes, they ought to put school funding as the priority, not school vouchers. So anyway, that's kind of the feeling that I have.
It seems like the funding is, I guess, accepted on both sides, but the vouchers is what's holding up this bill. How are you guys feeling going forward with that? And I know you guys are saying to separate that. What is your overall goal to separate that, essentially?
identify yourself.
My name is Michael Lee. I'm the Executive Director of TARS, Texas Association of Rural Schools. And we were told in rural Texas that vouchers would not hurt our schools. However, when House Bill 100 from the House went to the Senate, they reduced the small and mid-sized allotment. They reduced transportation by 30%. They reduced the raises they were going to give teachers. They hurt all public schools. And when I take my poll at the coffee shops in rural Texas, and we talk about school choice, of course we're for school choice. We already have it out in rural Texas. But when I say, are you for taxpayer money going to private entities without transparency, without accountability, 100%, no.
I was wondering if someone too could talk a little bit about what schools are facing if we come out of this session or special session without any kind of financial increase.
Yeah, so I want to remind everybody that during COVID, and it's been an incredibly challenging time in public schools, serving children who have gone through enormous difficulties, families, communities. Meanwhile, educators are doing the same things at home and working and serving our communities and our children. And so coming into this session, we were hopeful that the incredible work that our schools have done would be recognized and honored, and that when morale is at such a time of low morale across the board, that the one way to honor our teachers would be to fund them, to give them at least an inflationary cost of living and that sort of thing. So what schools are facing right now is a shortage of people in almost every sector of their school districts. And we talk about teacher pay and morale, and that is the number one concern for all of us. But it's every position in a school district. And public schools aren't alone. The private sector is struggling to find people and bring them in. And we need a recognition from the legislature that says we have got to help you compete to find great people that are there. Schools are about to have a funding cliff where their federal funds are going to stop flowing that was there to help through the transition through COVID. And that funding cliff is going to have a profound impact. So if funds are not provided, what you'll find is that schools will not be able to give raises to the degree that they want. You'll see deficit spending. You'll potentially see staff cuts. You might see programming cuts. You're going to find that districts may have to go into their reserves if they have those. The consequences are dire. And I would remind people that in 2011, when this happened, we saw the impact on student outcomes. We saw the impact in the classroom. I was a superintendent at the time. We had to freeze salaries. We had to cut a ton of positions. We were barely hanging on. But that was at a time when there were limited funds at the state. We were going through an economic crisis. These are times of record abundance, and yet we're withholding funds and holding our schools hostage so that we can have a private school voucher that most communities in the state, when you ask at the coffee shop, do you want your dollars to go to pay this child's private school tuition, that doesn't accept everybody, that is not accountable to everybody, that is not transparent, and does not have an elected board to represent them. There's not a bond election that you can go out for. There's not a tax rate election that you approve. None of that. It's taxation without representation, which runs counter to American values.
You talk about student outcomes being affected in 2011. What do you see as the long-term effects of this if the school voucher program goes through, if you don't get the pay raises needed, the funding needed? I know all of us firsthand have probably seen the difference between an okay teacher and a great teacher. So
That's right.
What types of people will be, wanting to be teachers or staying? I applaud anyone who wants to be a teacher, but I think there's, there's a difference.
Yeah, we, in the last 2 or 3 years, have made the teaching profession almost unsustainable. And our best and brightest are needed in our public schools to serve our children. We should be building monuments to teachers on the Capitol grounds, not dismissing them or criticizing them at this time. We are concerned about the pipeline of educators. We're concerned about the pipeline of administrators, of people that are willing to say, I'm willing to step up, and yes, it's a challenging profession, but at least my state understands the value of what I provide. My community understands the value of what I provide, and I may not make the most money in the world, but I make a difference in this world, and I make a difference in the lives of children. But this legislative session has really been dismissive of our educators, and I think the long-term consequences of that are dire. I think we are in a crisis in the state of Texas and in our public schools, and if we don't do something to significantly show that our support, both through resources, through the words that we use when we talk about public education, all of those things are critical from our state leaders in ensuring that what this state has been built upon, which is public schools, we are rooted in history in our public schools, and if we want a bright future, that goes through public schools. We cannot outsource the American dream to private schools and profiteers. We just can't do it. It's too important.
What do you think is behind the huge effort to push up?
I've talked a lot, so who else? I'm happy to answer it, but does somebody else want to take that question?
You're fine.
Oh, great, thanks. Okay. So the question is, what's the push behind private school vouchers? And I think it's a complex push. Vouchers originated with Milton Friedman, an economist after Brown versus Board of Education, as a way to fight desegregation. You give a voucher to kids in your all-white school, and they can go to a private school and have that funded. And so I believe that and you can check that, but the vouchers originated as a way to prevent desegregation. I think that people don't like to have a tax bill. And property taxes and school taxes are one of our largest tax bills, and people that go to private schools want their tuition subsidized, so they're not paying taxes and private school tuition. Our thinking on that is, if you're going to accept public money, you have to follow the rules of the game that public schools follow. You have to accept all children. You have to love all children. You've got to provide services for all children. You have to be accountable to all taxpayers and transparent with what that money is. And I have not found that there's private schools that are willing to do that. So let's get the money with no accountability, or we can have taxation with representation for all children in the state and build our democracy and our future upon that. And to me, that's the choice that we're making right now. In the other states that have vouchers, it started very small like this. This is not going to end with special ed education savings account voucher. This is part of a long-term game plan to privatize public education. We've seen it in other states. Every session they move the target. John Kennedy said that there is something immoral about abandoning your own judgment. And I think that we should commend our House members who have stuck to their own judgment, their own values, their own principles, because they know the role that public schools play in our country. And they're willing to stand up and say, we need to fund our schools, and we need to make sure that they're protected from this private school scheme. And I find that to be heroic. And I'll just add this. Today is Memorial Day. Our fallen heroes defended our country. Public schools have made their sacrifice something worth defending internally. Public schools are the defense internally to make sure that all citizens are educated and that we have a public and common good for all people involved.
I have another question. If there's any local educators who can speak to what it's kind of looked like in their classrooms, and bonus if you were there in 2011 and we can talk about the direct impact we saw on student outcomes. I mean, I know often first thing to get cut is arts and extracurricular activities when you're doing budget cuts, and this session has been very centered too around mental health in light of school safety, and we know there's a lot of research that ties those extracurriculars with positive mental health outcomes for students. I know that's kind of a multi-layered question, but if anyone wants to take a stab at it.
Well, I'll jump in. Okay, I was there in 2011. I've served on the school board for 13 years. And I can't speak to the specific outcomes, but he is correct about the decline. We lost about 270 teachers in Plano ISD in 2011. And that included there were other employees besides that. That's a huge loss. We had to increase class sizes, right? And you can't increase class sizes K through 4, but beyond that, you can. And so there's more work for a teacher, less one-on-one, if you will, for a student. And I think that we are facing tremendous cuts. We currently have a $25 million deficit. Previous budget expectations were $40 million, but we've had some interest income based on a bond we sold in January. So that's a one-time help that we're not having a $40 million deficit this year. So think about how you can operate on fixed income with increasing costs. Like you said, you've got transportation, fuel, cafeteria, you've got custodial, property casualty insurance. All of those costs continue to go up. They're contracted, and their rates are tied to inflation. Our revenue is stuck. It's the basic allotment, and then if you tax any additional in the level 2, tier 2, then you got enrichment. But part of that is recaptured too. Don't get me started on recapture. Recapture is killing us in Plano. It's in Austin ISD, recapture alone this year will be at about $1 billion. In Plano ISD, our recapture is going to be $250 million. And since 1994, since recapture we participated in, we've paid in almost $3 billion. So there's a lot of moving parts. I think that the national narrative and the push on tearing down teachers, I just hate that, because teachers are the fabric of they are where the rubber meets the road and helps our children learn and be successful in life. They plant a seed for a tree that they may not ever see come to fruition, but they do that because they believe in children. I see a little child over there. Makes me tear up. So help me with the rest of the question that you asked.
I mean, you answered it. I was just talking about how the first thing to get cut, we usually see, I feel like, are extracurriculars and whatnot, and we know how important that is for kids.
Right. And so when you look at our budget, 86% of our budget is compensation related. Where do you have room to move when 8% of that budget is those contracted services that I just described with inflation provisions? You have about 4 to 6% that's I wouldn't even say it's squishy, but it's more flexible than when you have to then go in and start looking at compensation cuts. We don't want to do that. We want to keep all of our staff. And I think that Dr. Brown mentioned it's really hard right now to hire. There's a shortage, and with the national narrative picking on teachers, it makes it harder to want to stay in the profession. But we love our teachers, we want to keep them, but we will be forced with making tough decisions. And when you look at cutting, like you said, programs, we value fine arts in Plano ISD, and we have students that perform at the national and state championship level in all fine arts, sports, academics. It's amazing. So why do we want to tear that down with taking money away from public education, which I said earlier is the fabric of our community? I mean, I don't want to talk about Friday Night Lights, but boy, I guess we could cut football. Wow, would that be terrible? Yes. But we will have to look at other ways to be frugal, but we already do a zero-based budget. Every dollar that gets built into our budget is proven that we need it every year. There's no, okay, well, we got this last year, we're going to get it this year. Every dollar is substantiated. So it's a real problem in school districts.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm from Pflugerville ISD, and in 2011, what I saw were our teachers and staff came together when we had to make cuts, whether it was the librarians, our programs, the GT program, and saying, we can do this. One of the differences today is we don't have that dedicated workforce, the lack of teachers, and they are already burned out, their morale is low, and so to continue to provide the services that we would like to and that our parents expect, it is a challenge without the funding to help. Thank you.
What was your name?
Name and school district.
Your
Name
name,
and school
please.
district.
Verna Jean Mott from Pflugerville ISD.